and welcome back. Welcome to Realize 2020 with a new section, new breakout with 3 different presentations and about application modernization and connectivity, and would like to welcome first on stage, the virtual stage, Simon Musgrave. Simon, hi, hello,
hi,
welcome to be here.
Thank you. No, it's an honour. It's a shame we can't all meet in person because of the global situation, but I think we could make the most of it. And I will be missing the after presentation drinks and active discussions that are normal for the region, having worked out there for a while. So I think we've got some nice sessions planned. And Remco, is there anything you're particularly looking forward to?
Well, what I like so much about these 3 sessions is that it's a nice mixture of 3 things. It's us as a supplier explaining how we see the modernization market. It's IDC telling something, and one of our key partners, Microsoft. So it's a nice mix of everything. And what are you looking forward most?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. It's nice actually for people to hear the 3 different views of the same topic. You know, we as a vendor certainly have our own perspective based on our customers, but blending that with the market position from IDC with Martin, I think that's going to be really interesting. And then with the cloud service providers, you know, Bob Ellsworth picking up and what he's seeing in the market space, I really hope that that's going to give the overall picture to our audience, and they're going to take a lot from the sessions.
Yeah. Well, it sounds so very interesting, and I would like to give the stage to you, the virtual stage, that is.
Well, thank you very much, Remco.
Yeah.
Okay, let me crack on and get through the presentation without further ado. So, for those of you who don't know me, Simon Musgrave, I look after the AMC Application Modernization and Connectivity International team within Micro Focus. Some of you in the audience, I'm sure I've met before. I actually supported the Nordic region for about four years and have met many of the customer base that we've got there. And as I say, it's a shame we're not meeting in person because it's very entertaining having the conversations with yourselves. I think the digital transformation is something that is very different. If you look through history, in essence, we've been doing digital transformation ever since we started, so there's nothing really new with this. My first project for digital transformation was probably back in 1986, where we took an IBM DOS system across to an MBS system, and I think the dynamics then were about platform availability. Can we have the systems on the right platforms for that point in time? But DevOps is more about a whole host of different things. When we do digital transformations, it can be something as simple as understanding what we have today. We did a project with Wachovia Bank in the US, who've now merged in with Wells Fargo, and they actually just had a documentation issue. By recovering the technical documentation, that met their digital transformation requirements. It could be something as simple as we want to get product to market faster. So that's kind of the DevOps play in modern day speak. But again, optimizing your development process. And then again, that's a way to do things. And in other areas, such as insurance, for example, you've heard about the swivel chair, where people are using multiple systems and just moving from one to the other and entering the data. Well, you can update your user interface there and actually use robotic process automation to actually coordinate everything. So all these, I think, are examples of digital transformation that exist in the marketplace today, but are things that we don't necessarily deem to be digital transformation. So I'd like to actually take you a little bit back to, what's the market seeing? And we've got quotes from Forrester and Accenture, whereby digital transformation, driving business change, that's the #1 priority of businesses. At the business level, businesses want to drive revenue growth. They want to differentiate themselves from the rest of the market. They want that unique selling point. And that might simply just be time to market, which would clearly give them an advantage over their competition. But equally in today's age, reducing costs. You've seen that the result of the global pandemic, that more people are working from home. That means there are more people with more time to do online transactions. Those transactions cost money within organizations. And if those transactions are query transactions rather than revenue generating, they're actually an added cost to the business. So you'll see today that a lot of the financial markets, the financial contributors, they're actually seeing a huge demand for their services without any net increase in their revenues. I think globally across Europe, the interest rates are falling, and those falling interest rates means they get less income, less revenue. So everyone is now looking at this digital transformation, not just as a way to respond in the market, but also to have viability in the market, to have a product, a function that they can actually offer. If we have a look at the evolution of IT, and I always like the evolution of man to go alongside, and you can see we evolved to geek, which is where we're using all the IT equipment today. Computing is very similar. We have today Moore's law that people have questioned for the last few years, and then quantum computing came along. So we're seeing actually the growth in the processing power continue to evolve, continue to improve. If I look at some of the early machines that I used, frankly, my mobile phone has way more functionality now than any device I ever started on. Mind you, that is going back a few years. So how is that digital transformation mapped onto the evolution of IT? Perhaps not the best presentation chart to put in, but yeah, back in the 70s, 80s, we basically just had a mainframe. That's all we had. There were the big devices. There was lots of competition to IBM, Fujitsu, Hitachi, all those types of machines. And really, our digital transformation was about getting applications onto that platform. The digital transformation was making things available to our customers. When client server came along, we started to look at moving to the right size platform. So we had the AS400 systems 38 and 36s as they were in the 90s. And when we were looking at that type of infrastructure, we were moving the application systems that were developed on a mainframe onto those platforms because they were the right size for the right implementation. So in other words, we were moving systems to the right platform for them to be viable in the market space. Then when we got into the 2000s, we started seeing more people moving to the wider distributed platforms, whereby the smaller IBM mainframe boxes, for example, single system, probably up to about 500 MIPS, they were starting to be replatformed into the new distributed environment. That actually took a turn in the 2010s. We started seeing mainframes of 5,000 MIPS being migrated. And that, again, was to take advantage of the new technologies because we had the web, we had the mobile, and that was the right platform. If you look at the platform service providers, you'll hear from Bob a bit later, the scale-up, scale-out architecture, the infrastructure on demand, effectively, that most companies would want and need. What we can actually do is see the trend has actually now transformed. And I would say in the last 18 months alone, we've gone from the mainframe migrations that have been in the 10 to 15,000 up to 20,000 MIPS. We ourselves now have 2 projects in Europe that are over 200,000 MIPS of mainframe. Now, no, we're not moving them across with our customers within the next 12 months. It's a 5-year and a 10-year project in both those cases. But it's now at scale because of the value that new platform, the cloud providers are giving you. They're seeing the true value there in terms of the cost and the monetization. So that's where we're seeing the big change. Now, in order to get there, we've done a great job of meeting the business demands in IT. Whenever the business says, oh, yeah, we need this, we need that, get it out there. We're great. We will bolt all the component parts together to get success. But unfortunately, that results in a high level of complexity. It impacts agility because we are sticking a lot of different things together, and the agility is only as agile as the least agile component in the process. Our effectiveness does take a dip because, again, we're going across multiple areas to get the job done, and costs as a direct consequence and outcome, the costs will go up. So we need to actually have some way of sorting through this complexity, simplifying what we're doing while still meeting the business demand for this digital transformation. So what is it that we're seeing in the industry that is demanding a different style of migration transformation into the digital arena? We're seeing that on a number of fronts. Effectively, our customers are telling us that they've got three fundamental requirements. We're looking at application modernization drivers, infrastructure drivers, and process drivers. Now, if we were to look at business requirements just 5 years ago, it would be one of these that was primarily driving the business. And by addressing that one element, we would meet the business objective. That's not happening anymore. Businesses are asking for multiple things, i.e. complex business requirements. It's a hybrid challenge, as it says on the chart. If you look at it from an application perspective, applications are having to modernize themselves and open up new ways to market and services. In a waterfall environment, some of the larger financials, they're taking 9 to 12 months to release new product to market. Now, there are ways of speeding that up. Companies have done that, but fundamentally, it's the platform and the infrastructure that's containing them. We've got the Internet of Things, proliferation of devices. Everyone wants to get on and see what it is that their bank accounts are doing. For example, they've got a telco's bill. They want to see what the telco bill is doing. So systems need to be opened up for those new services. And it's not just being driven by a market requirement. Competition is driving that as well. So that's all at the application level. If we then look at the process side, I touched on it, time to market. People need new offerings in the market faster. I think COVID has actually given us a very good example of how quickly businesses can react when they have to. The number of organizations enabling home working is a very good indicator that when we put our minds to it in IT, we can make things happen. The process has to be a quality process. There's no good releasing a product to market. There's nothing worse than if you're dependent on one of your mobile apps, for example, you get an update and it stops working. You feel hard done by, and as a customer, you're instantaneously making other people aware of it. So there's a reputational risk if you don't have the quality that goes along with the time to market. And then there's the skills. There is just an explosion of skills required. So how can you get all those skills, merge them together in that process to make sure it all works properly? So that's required. And finally, if I go to infrastructure, and I'm sure Bob from Microsoft will actually cover this more later, but everyone wants a lower cost. They want OpEx versus CapEx. They're looking at on-prem versus cloud. They're looking at how can I have someone else manage my infrastructure so I don't have the overhead costs, and how can I scale? If you look at some of the successes in the last year, the cloud providers, all of them have been extremely successful because they've been able to scale for their customer base. Whereas on-prem hardware kit, you're in a position where you're looking at the physical tin being available. And when you're expanding quickly, a lot of the vendors had problems supplying that. So what we need to do is actually combine all of these and actually allow digital transformation to allow you to improve not just the application, but the infrastructure and the process. And I think we've got a unique proposition out there with our customers where we're able to do that and balance that. So if we have a look at our customer ING, for example, ING Bank in the Netherlands have actually successfully undertaken quite a radical transformation process where they also completely transformed their development process to a full DevOps environment whilst making use of their internal cloud facilities. So it's a very good example where they have optimized all three components here. So if we have a look at what is it that people can decide between, because quite clearly not everyone is going to want the one shoe fits all approach. So when we go into discussions with our customers, we actually work with them to look at their business drivers. So we're seeing the same things. So any of you that have worked in the mainframe environment for a number of years, you could have listed this slide out. These things are a constant within the marketplace that we work in today. The business always wants to optimize cost. When is it ever not wanted to optimize profitability? It's a constant. Risk needs to be taken out of the picture. They want standardization. We proliferated IT over the years, and bringing it back to a single standard is actually something that the market is looking to do. Simplify. I think you saw on the earlier diagrams, back-end systems are mainframes in the majority of cases, and there's a whole network of infrastructure that allows the end user to interface with that mainframe. So simplifying that model is always good, and aligning to strategy. Technical drivers have to be factored in. They have to map with the business drivers. I'm not going to walk through those. But then we end up really with a set of strategic options that we can look at. This is really a list of items that most of us have been looking at and considering for at least the last decade, probably longer in some cases, myself included. We can retire systems, replace them, revamp them, rehost, refactor, rewrite. I think it was the 7 Res in one organization's parlance at one stage. The difference, I think, today is that the maturity of some of the solutions has evolved considerably from what they were 5 years and 10 years ago. It was very often the case where when I'm having discussions with customers, they would say, well, I'm sorry, I have my core banking system. It has to run on the mainframe. Its reliability is there. I've got people who understand it there. It can't be hosted anywhere else. Well, now we have got customers that are really rehosting their core banking systems at scale with millions of customers. And they're doing that now because the infrastructure that we have, particularly within the cloud environment, allows full scale up, full scale out, and recoverable. So it's a very robust environment that this new architecture provides, which will allow our systems to run exactly as we require them to run, as they do today in a mainframe environment. So I think the message I will give here is that if you haven't looked at options for your systems, should the business requirements be driving you to do that, then don't rely on the picture that you saw 5 years ago, 10 years ago. That picture has changed quite considerably, and the options now are far better. And I think you'll find that a lot of the cloud vendors now, as you'll hear from Bob, are seeing a major uptick in interest and a realization that these things are possible to do now that maybe they weren't in the past. So how else are we helping customers? We very much have a model within our organization, and those of you who've been customers for years know this, where we look to try to work with customers to identify the trends and to help organizations progress along that path. And one of the things that we were finding within this sector of digital transformation is that organizations weren't able to put a marker down to say, how much have I actually got in terms of the maturity levels within my infrastructure, application, process, management, and culture? What I would highlight here is don't underestimate the cultural change. we kind of have a static momentum, if you like, which is a contradiction in terms. But when we are used to doing something a certain way for many years, the change of culture that's needed is actually quite large. And that was certainly one of the learnings that ING took from their transformational process. And if you go on the internet and Google them, that there's a number of public presentations that they've done to explain that, which is quite intriguing to listen to. So what we'll do is we will come in and work with you to actually categorize where within the maturity model your organization sits. And what you'll find is certain areas will be very mature and very ready for change. Others will be holding you back. And it's a matter of using this matrix, very high level, there's a lot more detail behind it, obviously, to actually get a feel for where you are and what is appropriate for your organization. In addition to that, we have a number of offerings that we will bring. And these are kind of to give you an idea of what other people are doing. Infrastructure for me is something that the cloud service providers are able to position. I think most organizations have some form of cloud strategy, usually a multi-cloud strategy, and you'll find that they have a lot of information in that area. For us, we're a consumer. When we help you move your application systems over, we consume, we look at Docker and Kubernetes, all of which are there to help us give you that robust application environment that will maintain and manage your systems in the same way as you do on the mainframes today. But these are some of the options that we can bring to the table, and some of the organizations I'm sure represented on the call today will have already undertaken some of these changes, from application assessments, which is understand what you've got. And I think if I were giving anyone a tip, it's understand what you have. All too often, we're finding that companies are making large-scale bets on their business on limited information. And I think a lot of people who have mainframe environments know full well that there are certain systems that are well known and other systems where, let's just say, the intellectual property has been released over time from the organization, leaving a technical debt that has to be recovered before one can move forward to change these application systems. So bringing things really to a close, going through this then, we have modernization is a preferred IT strategy for 2020. Modernization, digital transformation, IT, we've got a great way of using different words, new buzzwords to mean exactly the same thing. So for me, digital transformation is yet another variant on how we modernize. We've got a unique value proposition, I believe. We've got the ability to provide an environment in which you can take the existing application systems you have on the mainframe, place them into and consume the new architecture, the new value benefits within the cloud to give you that robust platform in which to run your systems. We have a very large investment in our technology. Most people don't realize that even our COBOL users are benefiting from over $60 million of development investment per annum. Now, that level of development investment has been going on for over 40 years within the organization. So I think you can see why this is a robust and secure solution within the marketplace. So you can have a look on this slide as to some of the customer successes we've got. We've got many customers across many platforms, some of whom have done single systems, some of whom have actually done a full migration of all the systems on their mainframe. They have actually transformed off and turned off the mainframe. Others are in the process of doing so now, and others are providing mainframe systems in a distributed platform for consumption by their own customers. So there is a complete mix of how the organizations we support utilize the solutioning technology we have to provide value in their market space. And as I say, the cloud today is actually a unique offering whereby it cuts down a lot of internal costs and gives flexibility. One of our customers has what I would term as a calendar-centric cycle to their business. So there are periods of the year where they need a small box to run their systems on. Others at Christmas, where people are relaxed and maybe going online to do bookings, etc. Their business expands and they're looking at majorly increasing the capacity to cope with the workload. So we've had many examples in the UK where some of the grocery stores that we have over here, they open up their online ordering for Christmas, and because of the current pandemic, you have to go in a queue to get in the queue to get into their system to do the ordering. So again, reasons why businesses might want to move to a more scalable cloud infrastructure. And finally, I have to finish with a little bit of marketing salesy stuff, which is really, if what you've seen today and what you've heard, and indeed what you will hear from the other presenters coming up, is of interest to you, then from a Micro Focus perspective, we're quite happy joining with you to do a value profile meeting, which is complimentary. It's one day where we can look at and explore. If you go onto our website, there's a whole host of material you can look at that will support this presentation. So just coming up to the half an hour that I was allotted. So I'd like to thank you all very much for your time. I appreciate virtual events are somewhat difficult to actually participate in and to interact with, but I thank you all for your time, and I'd like to hand back to yourself, Remco, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Simon. I hear a little bit of an echo, but thank you for being here. Really, really interesting. And we'll now immediately go to the next presenter, Bob. Are you there? I don't see Bob yet.
Yeah, I sure am. Had to get off mute.
Good afternoon. Welcome here. I'm very glad to have you here as one of my. I don't see you on the screen, by the way. I say that to the guys behind.
It's coming up right now. Yep.
Okay, but we see each. At least we hear each other. Megan. Oh, is your camera on, Bob?
Yep, it's on now. Can you see me okay?
Yes, good.
There we go.
Yeah, and I see, good. Immediately branded with your shirt on from Microsoft. Very good to see. Me as a
thank you.
And as you know, I'm responsible for the channel in our region, so I'm always glad to announce one of our most strategic partners. So the floor is yours, and thank you very much for being here.
Well, thank you, Hank. I sure appreciate it. And I really enjoyed also listening into Simon's presentation. Part of it is to ensure that I don't duplicate information that he covered, but also ensure that we provide the Microsoft view on Azure as the new mainframe, which I'll be talking about for about the next half hour. Again, I thoroughly enjoyed Simon's presentation and just the history and experiences that he's had helping customers with transformation, prior to Micro Focus and with Micro Focus. Just as a little bit of an introduction. So again, my name is Bob Ellsworth. I'm the director here at Microsoft, responsible for mainframe transformation worldwide. I've been with Microsoft almost 20 years, and prior to that, I spent 30 years working on IBM-compatible mainframes. For those of you who might have remembered in the 70s through 90s, Amdahl. So I worked at Amdahl for 24 years and helped deliver, install, support Amdahl mainframes worldwide for our customers, such as many of you who may be attending this call. So long, deep history on mainframes and also on Microsoft. And I really combined the two into building out a mainframe transformation offering from Microsoft starting in 2008. So this is part of the journey that I've been on in just being able to embrace new technologies, new capabilities. And since 2008, we've helped our customers with over 1,000 mainframe migrations. And what we've found is historically, the business drivers have been costs. So mainframes are hugely expensive compared to distributed systems. And when distributed systems can deliver the same level of reliability, availability, serviceability that a customer requires on the mainframe, then they become a very viable alternative. And so many of my customers, quote cost as being the biggest driver. As Simon mentioned, being able to transform from CapEx into OpEx and embrace new ways of doing funding, avoiding an upgrade of the mainframe hardware. Those of you that are on Z13s, as you know, it's out of marketing support now, as IBM requires you to be on the current generation -2. And because of that, about 60% of our engagements worldwide are with customers with Z13s who are looking for an alternative to having to upgrade that mainframe and having that kind of cost impact. Cost has been the biggest driver historically. In the last few years, because of digital transformation and more customers wanting to improve time to market, being responsive to the business, changing those mainframe applications in a non DevOps kind of way, in more of a waterfall process, just takes a long time. And more customers are interested in speeding up that process of releasing new functionality, new capability, to their employees and to their customers. So agility has become a real big interest of our customers. We're seeing more and more of this great tsunami with people retiring. The skills are becoming more difficult to find. Those customers doing development on the mainframe using TSY SPF are really locked into those legacy systems. And that ability to embrace modern development environments, such as with Micro Focus, being able to do COBOL development in Eclipse or Visual Studio, is one of the ways of addressing that skill shortage or pending skill shortage. And then in the last 2 years, a huge catalyst has been cloud choice. So more and more customers come to us and say, well, we're really interested in not having a data center in the future and moving to a consumption model, consuming resources as we need them in the cloud. And that's been a very big catalyst where the customer will look at their IT landscape. They'll take a look at their Linux and Windows VMs. Those are pretty easy to move to the cloud. But what's a bigger challenge is the mainframe in the mid-range. And that's where solutions like ours with Micro Focus really come to bear to allow you to migrate workloads off the mainframe where appropriate and take advantage of cloud services. So the ability to move workloads to the cloud is becoming more and more important to our customers. About 75% of the engagements we're on now, the cloud is the destination of the migration. So these are the key drivers that we've seen over the last 12 years and the evolution that we've seen within those drivers. And a lot of times, our customers will ask, well, what the heck does Microsoft have to do with mainframe transformation? And as I mentioned, here at Microsoft, we built a partner ecosystem with tools and services to transform workloads from the mainframe to take advantage of the latest technology. And what Microsoft does is, because of our experiences and our partner ecosystem, we act as a trusted advisor to ensure our customers pick the right solution and the right set of partners and the right destination in order to be successful. So it's really providing that trusted advisor resources and experiences to help our mutual customers. Micro Focus, we've had a long relationship with Micro Focus, actually going back to 2004. And then with 2008, my building up our practice, Micro Focus is and continues to be our top rehosting partner with the tools and technologies that Micro Focus provides. And most of our systems integrators rely on Micro Focus technologies to support their mainframe transformation activity with their customers. So this is just a brief view of our partner ecosystem, the top partners that we work with, and Micro Focus and our SIs being the key partners that we work with day in and day out as being the most successful partners in the space. And as was mentioned by Simon in his descriptions around digital transformation, we see the very same thing, where digital transformation is being embraced by customers around the world. They're so interested in moving from their old legacy systems, taking advantage of the latest technologies. And when you think of mainframe migration, it fits very, very well within the digital transformation motion. The first case where most customers would consider is optimizing operations, being able to reduce costs for running legacy systems, and to reinvent the operations of those mainframes by moving off of the legacy hardware into cloud technologies. But it doesn't stop there. Once you are able to move into the cloud, you can take advantage of new Azure capabilities, cloud capabilities, such as BI and analytics, such as Power BI. So taking that mainframe data and using it in new and different ways. In addition, we think of the history of application development, where in the 80s, 90s, people would write applications typically on a single platform. As Simon mentioned, part of the IT transformation, embracing other platforms and building out connections between those through web service and services-oriented architecture was part of the journey in the 2000s. And more recently, it's really about not writing all the applications yourself, or even just using packaged apps or cloud software as a service applications, but consuming services. Today, if you had the need to use cognitive recognition, you wouldn't write your own cognitive recognition services. You'd consume those services from the cloud. And that's where this transformation journey continues. It's not a single solution fits all. It's more about a continual evolution, again, taking advantage of the latest technologies to support the needs of the business. So getting that workload into the cloud allows you to then continue expanding those applications. Don't throw away what you have, use those legacy systems, but expand them to embrace new cloud services, new cloud capabilities. And we'll touch just a little bit, on this the R's that Simon mentioned earlier. When we think of the multiple R's, and as we engage with customers and provide guidance on the best journey for them for their mainframe transformation, every customer is unique in their technologies that they're using in their mainframe deployments or mid-range deployments. We do see patterns with ZOS along with COBOL and Kix, and DB2 is very common, but every customer has some iterations on that. And a lot of opportunities you have. One is remote hosting. So if you haven't done it already, if you're managing the mainframe yourself, having a third party take over that management, either in your data center or in their data center. We have partnerships with the likes of T-Systems and Insono and DXC that provide that remote hosting capabilities, but don't stop you there. They support embracing that transformation to the cloud, or remote hosting may be the first step. The customers are always retiring apps they no longer need. You may retain your systems that are working well and surround the mainframe with modern BI and analytics. You may replace some of your custom apps with packaged apps. You may replatform, so taking a running system and moving it to run in x86 through emulation. Rehosting is what we see most predominantly with Micro Focus, because it's the least risk, the lowest cost, and the quickest time to move workloads off the mainframe. And for some customers that are facing a skill shortage, they may choose to refactor to C# or to Java. See that as well, or rewrite new systems in Java as well. And so each system, each method is part of that journey, analyzing the workloads and deciding on the best path for each application, for each workload that you have on the mainframe. Once you're able to move work off the mainframe and reduce costs, you can use those cost savings to re-envision, rewrite, re-architect, re-envision your technology and solutions. Again, this is a journey. It's not a single solution, but a continued journey supporting the business initiatives. Let me share with you just a couple examples. Simon mentioned a couple of financial institutions in Europe, having 200,000 MIPS. And when I first started into this supporting this mainframe transformation business, most of the analysts were saying, if you have 10,000 MIPS, you could probably migrate that, but you really wouldn't want to do it with more than that. As Simon mentioned, and as we're seeing as well, even the largest customers in the world are now evaluating and starting on the journey of mainframe transformation. One of the biggest capital markets organizations that I've been working with has 300,000 MIPS. They spend more than $500 million a year with IBM. And their goal is to get off the mainframe in 3 to 5 years. So as we supported that goal, introduced them to both Micro Focus and connected with one of our systems integrators, they started looking at each set of applications. In some cases, they rewrite applications in Java if the apps aren't really satisfying their business need. In other cases, they'll be rehosting with Micro Focus. We've already completed the first migration of the first workload to Azure. And the second system, which is this personal record keeping system, which is really a 401k, where you log in, you check your balances after the markets close, And it takes sometimes 6 or 8 hours before all the transactions are reconciled. So part of the solution that we've designed is the ability to do all the creation at a minimal cost, and also to do that at 2 hours instead of 8 hours. So building solutions like that allow you to take advantage of the hyperscale capabilities of the cloud and address the needs of the business and improve the experiences of the customers. So a great example of a very large migration that we're doing. Another super example of how Microsoft participates and helps our customers. It's not just myself and my team where we help with customer engagements, but also we've got resources within Azure engineering that have deep mainframe migration expertise and also a deep expertise in Azure. We also have resources in the Azure data R&D team that have deep database migration expertise and skills moving databases off the mainframe. And in this case, we jointly with Micro Focus had a customer in Germany, large insurance company, that were doing a migration of their system, their PL written in PL1, and for their database, they preferred to stay in DB2 because of the massive parallel sysplex system that they had set up and the stored procedure complexity that they had. Staying in DB2 and running that on Linux was the preferred path. Well, in order to mirror the similar capabilities to parallel sysplex, that ability to share databases across multiple virtual machines or partitions on the mainframe is provided by IBM with PureScale. So our Azure Global Engineering team worked directly with IBM, with a customer, Micro Focus, one of our partners, to implement a DB2 PureScale in Azure. It provides similar capabilities for high availability, disaster recovery, and failover, and sharing that DB2 database across Linux virtual machines. And this is fully supported by IBM and the valid in the configuration. At the end of the presentation, I'll give you some links, and one of those is to the white paper on how to implement DB2 PureScale, either in Azure or in your own data center. And another really interesting example of how the Azure engineering team is helping us make improvements to Azure to support challenges that we may encounter in mainframe migrations. In this case, we had a customer that we engaged with this March that provides credit card transaction inquiry services to most of the credit card companies, in addition to providing statement access to consumers, to their banking statements and credit card statements. They had the set of applications that provided that service using about 65,000 MIPS on the mainframe. And it had already made the decision, since it wasn't really providing their business needs, to rewrite that functionality in Java. In this case, rewrite was the right path for them. But as they looked at the performance requirements of vSAM, they really couldn't find a suitable database mechanism in the cloud to provide the level of transaction support that was required. Worked directly with this customer and the Azure engineering team, the Cosmos DB team, and we're able to create an emulation for vSAM in Cosmos DB. A performance test occurred in August, showing that the Azure solution actually outperformed the mainframe solution they had today, and they expect to go production on this in December. So a very quick time to deployment and the ability to drain 65,000 MIPS off their mainframe and take advantage of cloud services to handle the elasticity or scalability that they need. So a couple good examples of how Microsoft helps with our direct ties into Azure engineering to provide the capabilities that our customers require. In addition, we think of some differentiation that we provide with our cloud. Of course, you've got choices in which cloud that you deploy to, whether it be Azure, AWS, or GCP. And some of the advantages we have here at Microsoft, for those of you that support global organizations, we have more Azure regions than the other cloud providers combined. So you can distribute these workloads across multiple regions worldwide. We invest significantly in security through our Defense Operations Center, because security of these systems is paramount. You're trusting the cloud to run and support your workloads. And the other thing is the requirement for compliance within your industry or within your geography. We have more attestations and certifications than the other cloud providers combined. So the ability to move your critical workloads to the cloud and have trust in your industry or geography that the cloud will fully support you is absolutely there with the compliance offerings. A little bit on architecture. When we think of the transformation from a mainframe to Azure, with the Micro Focus enterprise server technology, you've got all the support you need for the COBOL compiler, the PL1 compiler, Kix and IMS, the databases. But as you look at the rest of the surrounding systems on the mainframe, it's so important to architect the solution to ensure that you provide replacements for every one of those mainframe pieces of functionality. We work together with Micro Focus and our systems integrators to evaluate your current environment and propose an architecture providing functionality replacements for all the mainframe functionality that you depend on. As an example, if you're using RACF or ACF2 or Top Secret for security, we replicate that identity information from those systems into extensions to Active Directory, and that gets synchronized with Azure Active Directory for doing access control. We have a set of management tools through OMS to manage these environments. And then for developer tools, Visual Studio and Azure DevOps or Eclipse are the cloud-based tools that we provide for doing development on either the mainframe workloads or the rehosted, the transferred mainframe workloads. So it's so important to get this architecture right, so that you know exactly what needs to be done in order to move these mainframe workloads to an Azure environment. A couple other things that are fascinating as we go through and work with our customers and partners on architecting the Azure solution is we look at each partition, each LPAR you're running in the mainframe, and we map that to a set of virtual machines. So you simply don't take an LPAR and then put everything together in the same VM. You really need, for the highest level of performance, you really need to distribute that across VMs, be more like a distributed workload, an x86 workload. For that reason, as we're architecting the Azure environment, we'll take a partition from the mainframe for production. We'll map it to a set of application virtual machines, database virtual machines, utilities virtual machines, services and functionalities to support it. All of these are really together as a forest of virtual machines, replacing that functionality of a partition or LPAR. We do the same thing for each of the production systems, setting up LPARs or replacements for test Q&A pre-production and development environments. Also, one of the beauties of Azure is the ability to have backup or disaster recovery at a very, very low cost. So where today most customers have a primary mainframe, a secondary mainframe, perhaps in a remote location, or disaster recovery service that you can fail over to. The beauty of Azure is we can architect the solution for backup within the same Azure region or disaster recovery to fail over to a different Azure region at a very, very low cost. The reason being, you don't pay for compute, you don't pay for Azure compute for these backup systems when they're not running. You only pay for compute when you shift it over and you're running these systems in production. So you're really only paying for storage in order to have the images ready to go that are constantly being synchronized with your production system. That's one of the great advantages of Azure. And I'll cover several other advantages on the next slide. Out of this environment for synchronization, for storage replication, and you have backup and DR. For those of you that don't have backup and DR, this is a nice value add by moving these workloads up to the cloud. The next thing we do is we take this configuration that we defined and we map it into Azure virtual machines using our Azure calculator. This way we can provide estimates, monthly cost estimates and yearly estimates on what the cost of Azure would be compared to the hardware cost you're paying on your mainframe today. On average, most customers spend about $1,000 per MIP per year for the mainframe hardware because you'll buy an upgrade and then depreciate that upgrade over 4 to 5 years. So for an 8,000 MIP mainframe, typically you expect to spend $8 million a year, for the hardware for 8,000 MIPS. Mapping this to the cost of Azure, the cost is only $426,000. To provide the similar capabilities that you have on the mainframe as far as capacity and processing capacity, but also to provide for disaster recovery and backup and the systems waiting on the side to take over the workload if you have a system failure. So you get some nice advantages, but also at a much lower cost. The rule of thumb we use is that the Azure cost are typically 10% or less of the mainframe hardware costs. And those cost savings is what helps you justify the cost of the migration for moving these workloads off the mainframe. As I mentioned, things like high availability is so critical. And again, being a mainframe person for 30 years before I came to Microsoft, almost 20 years, it was so critical on our mainframes that we delivered reliability, availability, serviceability. So those of you that have worked on the mainframe for some time, you recognize this terminology. When I first came to Microsoft, I was in the Windows Server team responsible for driving improvements to Windows and SQL to be more mainframe class. And when I came in, one of the first things I did was ask the engineers, well, what happens if you lose a processor? And I was told, oh, well, if you lose a processor, you get a blue screen, of course. The system goes down. And I said, well, that's the dumbest thing in the world. Being able to recover from hardwares has been something we've been doing on the mainframe since 1972. And so we went about to architect, working with the engineers and Intel, architect the machine check architecture for the x86 platform. Made that available in 2003 on Titanium, 2008 on the rest of the x86. So that started the journey to making high availability enhancements to Windows and SQL that are also available in Azure. We think of things like parallel sysplex and providing for sharing of databases between system partitions, between mainframes, being able to distribute transactions between mainframes. And that ability to do the same kind of capability in a distributed system with things like SQL Always On, being able to fail over from one SQL database to another. Azure Site Recovery, which is automatically copying these images and any changes that are taking place so you can fail over from one system to another. Or even replacing geographically dispersed parallel sysplexes with Azure Geo-Replication Services. So these are, again, great capabilities that you've come to expect on the mainframe that you can count on properly configured. You can count on the same level of reliability, availability, serviceability in the cloud as you have on the mainframe today. Also, an area that I had so much fun is on the mainframe. I started using VM back in 1972. And so, deep experience on mainframes and logical partitioning helped drive the acquisition of Connectix here at Microsoft to become our virtualization technology, which is the basis of our virtual server, Hyper-V, Azure virtualization for providing that capability to share virtual machines capacity on the single server. When you think of elastic computing, of course, as Simon mentioned, many of you may have peak periods at the end of year, at the end of month, where additional capacity is required. You may pre-purchase that additional capacity and have it standing by, or if you didn't and you're hitting a peak load you didn't expect, IBM does provide a functionality called Capacity Upgrade on Demand, where you can have additional processors that are already in the server turned on to handle that peak period and pay for the software and hardware during that period of time, turn it back off when you're done. This is actually based on one of the patents that I own on the IBM mainframe for adding and removing processors from a running system. So we did something very similar in Azure, but you're not having to contact us in order to increase the size of your virtual machines or the capacity you're using. With Azure Elastic Computing, you're in control. You can dynamically add or remove capacity as needed. Instantaneously. And the beauty of Azure is you only pay for what you use. So you're not having to pre-purchase hardware. You're able to handle these peak periods at a very, very low cost, again, only when you need it. And then you think of developer tools, especially with Micro Focus COBOL, that ability to move development off the mainframe and use Eclipse or Visual Studio. These days, most customers want to have an agile DevOps environment to be able to make incremental changes on a very quick basis and drive those changes out for deployment to support the needs of the business. And Azure DevOps, the fact that it supports both Eclipse and Visual Studio, allows for an amazing set of tooling to support that effective way of driving modern development instead of the waterfall development of ages ago. And lastly, deploying technology, as Simon mentioned, the support for Kubernetes, for Docker, and now in the most recent release in June, OpenShift allows you to deploy updates, to deploy applications, deploy systems in a more modern way in this new environment. So great ways of continuing the traditions that you've come to expect on the mainframe, and also extending beyond those. The reliability, availability, serviceability, properly configured, Azure delivers that, but then going beyond that with unique features, functionalities, capabilities that are only available in the cloud. One last area is turning data into action. As I mentioned early on, that ability to consume Azure services to do analytics against your data, cognitive recognition, Databricks and Spark. So it allows you to consume and take advantage of these Azure services without having to depend on the custom code to support those capabilities in this new modern world. So a number of examples for delivering capacity and capabilities in Azure. And lastly, in this deck, which I'm sure you have access to, we do have a number of resources that will help you better understand how Microsoft can assist in mainframe transformation. We've got everything from white papers and mainframe migration to Azure. As I mentioned, that DB2 peer scale white paper, number of videos that we've done and webcasts are fully available. But this set of resources to give you additional information. Lastly, we're here to help along with our great partners, Micro Focus and our systems integrators. If you'd like to reach out to me, send an email to mainframetransformed@microsoft.com, and I'd be happy to help you on your journey of mainframe transformation. And thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Bob. Very interesting. Not only can they send an email to you, but also for the people watching this, we have a live chat function, so you can write all your questions, and we make sure it will come to you, Bob. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and have a great day. And I would speaker, my last speaker, Martin Sundblad from IDC. Martin, are you here? There you are. Thank you very much, Martin. We had a little bit of a glitch here, but that happens in the virtual world and not in a physical world. And there was also what what Simon already mentioned, that he would love to be here on stage with us, of course. It has been, for all of us, a tremendous, strange year with a lot of things that had happened. Is it even for you possible to make a consistent analyst in your job during such a year?
Well, it's been a very strange year. So the short answer is no. No. This is hard to analyze, and we haven't seen the end of it yet. But of course, there are, and we'll walk through them, there are a number of trends that we can see. There are a number of accelerators that we can predict on, and there are, of course, a number of observations that we can do. But as with the earlier crisis of 2000 and 2008, some of it remains to be seen and remains to be found out once we see the larger, longer waves. So, but that perhaps, tell me, shall I just start the presentation?
Yeah, start the presentation. Thank you very much.
Very good. There you are. So, 2020 is of course a year to remember or to forget. It's not difficult to find challenges, global challenges. Perhaps, and we've listed a few of them. I'm sure you all recognize most of them. Perhaps the most serious ones are the loss of faith and the loss of trust in our institutions and leaders that we've seen in some countries, and that we believe will impact our business negatively. Perhaps also the increase of cyber threats. There has been a significant increase during the pandemic, and we need to be aware and be even more cautious and invest even more in security as we move along. But moving on, perhaps, to what has impacted the Nordics more, moving away from the global challenges. Now, IDC has since March done bi-weekly surveys on the sentiments of buyers and IT investments. And we measure this across something that we call the COVID curve. And we measure to see whether companies believe they are in crisis mode, whether they are in slowdown mode, whether they are in recession mode, or whether they feel that they are returning to growth or even the next normal. And the picture is very scattered. There is not many companies that believe that they've come all the way through, but the sentiments change a lot. Overall, we can see that in the Nordics, there is still a very strong faith in IT. Even though that GDP is declining, IT investments continue to grow. Even IT services that was most impacted by projects that were stalled, projects that were stopped, projects that were postponed. Even IT services is not impacted as much as we originally thought. We have a decline of 1% only in IT in IT services, and overall growth in IT investments in 2020 predicted to be around 1.3%. This is, of course, due to a very strong underlying digital transformation trend, both in the front-end digital transformation, the business services, and in the back-end, the core IT. What has happened is a continued and intensified march to cloud. The public cloud has grown even more than it did in 2019, which already then was significant. And of course, a new trend and an intensified trend of workplace transformation, not just working from home, but combining working from home, remote communication, collaboration into a new way of seeing the workplace. And this transformation of the workplace has reached a much higher priority than it had before the COVID. What's also worth noting is that the gap between demand and supply in skills in many of IT areas, not all, but very many of them, that skills gap is still there. So we still have a shortage of skills throughout the Nordic countries. So yes, there is an uncertainty, and yes, there is a hesitation. But many of the trends that we saw already in 2019 have been accelerated. And many of the trends that we saw in 2019 have remained. So all in all, from an IT perspective, the Nordic countries seem to continue on the path that they had in 2018 and 2019, with changes in priorities, but with a tremendous strength in the underlying digital transformation. So that allows us perhaps to discuss what drives the digital transformation. And one of the things that we saw in 2018 and 2019 was the emergence of customer experience-driven digital transformation. Now, customer experience has been a driver for very long, of course, and again, customer satisfaction has been there for ages. But we did an extensive research in 2019 because we saw a shift in buying behavior with large customers. And the, well, if you like, generation shift even, which easily made you to connect the dots and see that something is going on here with buying behavior. And we could see that the customer behavior, the buying behavior went from cost optimization to much more customer experience-driven buying behavior. An informed, an insightful, an impatient customer that does not want to wait, that does not want to see any glitches, and sees the engagement from a vendor on a holistic view. Not just the customer-facing activities are impacted, but also the back end and the delivery mechanisms and the support mechanisms of the supplier are now impacted by the customer and impacts the buying behavior. Therefore, we've seen quite a significant shift in how the DX is driven. And a strong linking of customer experience, projects, use cases, initiatives towards the back end. And at least the larger enterprises taking a much more holistic approach in their strategic initiatives. The impact is slowly reaching it. It was by the end of 2019 that it started to reach the back-end transformation. And therefore, we ran a number of large surveys in late 2019 and early 2020 to see, okay, how much has that impacted now the back end? So, the result is quite a significant shift in the sense and the urgency and the priority for application modernization, which then is part of the back-end transformation. In our large March survey, we had 65% of stakeholders saying that they are already underway, and 75% of CIOs, compared to 33% in 2016, said that application modernization is now high or top priority. Which to us is again a sign that the customer-facing activity and the customer experience is driving a large portion of the back-end transformation. This is not just cost optimization. This is linked to how you want to treat the customer. Another very clear indicator is the spending. And just looking at the CRM and ERP spending, it has a 7% annual growth predicted from now till 2024, which is quite significant. It was even higher in 2019 and remains quite high actually in 2020 compared to 2019. But this rather rapid and significant shift in sentiment towards application modernization has had some consequences. And in the large survey that reached over 2,000 different enterprises globally that we did in March. We could see the sort of, I'm not sure whether we should say traditional, but still, people saw this as a technology initiative, and forgot to connect it to process strategy, to people, and thereby missing out on some of the benefits, and also falling in the traps of some of the classic inhibitors to change programs. The second one is rather interesting. The front-end development has been very much around DevOps. It's emerged and developed around the mega cloud providers, their innovation platforms, DevOps, agile development. Scrum has been a natural part of that development. Whereas in the back end, we've done it the old way. We've had typically waterfall projects, doing upgrades, doing implementations, turning things over to IT operations staff. This is now about to change, but there is still a gap between the way that the DevOps team work and the way that the IT ops team work. Enterprises are struggling hard to narrow this gap because they see that they need to work and operate in the same way. So IT ops is adopting the DevOps way of working, but most of Nordic companies are far from there. We believe at IDC that this is a necessity, that we are actually a bit too few to have a gap in processes and ways of working between DevOps and IT ops. Another observation is that the amount of time that developers are spending on development is a bit too low, 17% in Europe. So an observation and a trend and a need from both the developers and their CIOs, and what we can expect on the market is a move towards increasing the time that developers spend on development and less on administration. The fourth one is connected to the first one. It's an observation that change management processes are rarely there when it comes to application modernization projects. People rarely realize that this impacts processes and that it is a change project, again, because of treating it as more of a technology project. Looking at what type of application modernization we are looking at. Well, the first one is something that I believe most of you recognize. This is part of the march to the cloud, moving on-site to private to public cloud, finding the optimal balance between on-premise, private cloud, public cloud. This has been very much accelerated, of course, as well during the pandemic. Interestingly enough, is that mainframe modernization is turning up as number 2. So big trend. Still, we need to find out what it is that is the main driver behind mainframe modernization. At the moment, we're just saying that, okay, this is the case. Banks, insurance companies, etc., with large mainframes are moving them to cloud. They're modernizing them. They're changing them to become more process oriented. A significant shift actually from earlier investigations that we've done. Packaged application upgrade. That is, however, something that has been going on for the last 5 years, a move towards replacement and implementation of new ERPs, CRMs, and production systems. So, assuming that you buy this, you accept that, okay, application modernization is something that is prioritized and imminent. What are then the consequences of our research? What are our recommendations towards a successful modernization? For those of you that have done it in the past, you know that it's not easy. Old systems are typically connected. If you start to change one, others will follow. If you pull one thread, others will follow along. So changing an application landscape is not that easy. We have in Europe, on average, in large organization, 120 systems in the back end. And they're all integrated. And many of them are integrated in a point-to-point integration. And they depend on one another. What emerges as best practice for this? Because we are now gaining experience from application modernization. What emerges as best practice is a use case approach. Breaking down application modernization into individual cases that can have a business case and a return on investment. That can be done. Linking these use cases to one another so that you can see which ones are dependent on the others, and linking them into initiatives, that is also something that can be done. And the recommendation and the observation from the more successful modernization projects is that when you have linked them, you can judge on a scale of impact and risk which ones you can prioritize first, second, and third, and put them into waves or horizons. And yes, the old story of linking technology transformation to process, people, and organization, that still applies. And this is a very clear observation from this large survey that we did, that successful application modernization tends to involve at least 4 of these 6. And we conclude then that recommendation is that you consider all of these when you do your modernization. Consider it a change project or a transformation project. It makes life more difficult if you do that. But it secures you from falling into the most obvious traps. So, in summary, it is worthwhile and it is worth the time to investigate. There is clearly an emerging very strong link between front-end customer experience and back-end application modernization. And so the recommendation and the observation is that at least you should investigate whether this can be done. and take advantage of ongoing customer experience initiatives to further enhance your backend application modernization. The enlargement is obvious. Include process, people, and risk, at least, not just technology. It's an old story. It's an old wisdom. It's as old as IT, I believe, but still valid. And obviously, still needs to be repeated because these modernization projects tend to become technology-focused, technology-driven, and that is both missing out on opportunity and enlarging the challenges that need to be overcome. There are also by now a vast amount of learnings from the research that we now did. We can see that there are so many companies doing this both in US and in Europe, that there is a significant amount of learnings with the suppliers that are doing this, helping the customers. So I believe it's 23% of the examples have linked their application modernizations to automation. And this is something that we believe should be done since automation is there to free up resources. You are all heading for a skills gap and a skills shortage, and automation of IT ops and the merging of DevOps and IT ops is one way of many to free up resources. So that, Remco, concludes my presentation.
Well, thank you very much, Martin, and thank you for all your insights. And at the end, you came through good, so everything went well. Thank you very much. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, this ends our program for Realize 2020. I would like to thank you very much for attending. I would like to point out again that if you have any questions, you can put it in the chat right now, and you will get an answer as quickly as possible. I hope to see you next year. I hope that it's a physical event somewhere in your country. And with that saying, stay safe, stay connected. Thank you very much. Goodbye.